He paid dearly for his venture, for the secrets are eternal, laid before our eyes every day, every night. Their meaning is impossible to grasp. So we reach for lucid thoughts, those that will calm us and bring comfort.
Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography. My name is Pierce Lyden. I'm here with
George Marston.
And we're your hosts for another arc of Spawn.
Yes,
the greatest
indeed.
superhero of the Image Comics 90s.
That's true.
How you doing,
true.
George?
You know, I'm hanging in there. We'd say that a lot. That's kind of how it goes. Had a long work week over in the comic minds at Newsarama, whose opinions are not reflected in this podcast.
It is crazy that they put you in mines and try to find diamonds. Like, I know that you thought you were going to be writing about comic books, but the fact that like you've gotten pretty good with a pickaxe is impressive.
Well, they keep thinking they're going to find another Action Comics #1 down there or something.
Well, listen, it happened once, it'll happen again, right?
That's right.
So,
yeah. No, maybe it won't. Maybe it will. Anything is possible. I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey on Friday night a couple nights ago, which is an incredible movie. But
I don't like that they ripped off the opening of Barbie.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Retroactively plagiarizing.
Yeah.
So many things do. But yeah, so that movie just opened my mind to the infinity of possibility again in one small way.
Is it your favorite Kubrick?
That's a hard question. And, oh God, I know that people have mixed opinions on him as a person, and I'll throw my hat in with that. But Stanley Kubrick is certainly my favorite director. Maybe I'm basic, but nothing feels like his movies. I did a double feature. I watched Dr. Strangelove, and then I watched 2001.
Ooh, I mean, both of those slam. So
yeah, I'm such a huge fan of so many of his films.
For me, it's The Shining.
Great movie, fantastic film.
And, I think it's better than the book.
Yeah, there's some controversy about that, whether Stephen King would agree or not. It certainly
he definitely does not.
No, he does not. It's incredibly striking. I've been lucky enough to stay in the Overlook Hotel, not the Overlook Hotel, the Stanley Hotel, which is the hotel that the Overlook Hotel is based on. A couple times I went up there for some Murder by Death shows every year.
Oh yeah, that's
so the
cool.
First 2 years they did it, we went up there and stayed, and it's pretty interesting. Did not see any ghosts, but I did see The Shining. They have a channel in the hotel that just plays The Shining 24/7.
Did they let you bring a big wheel?
Yes, and I rode it all around. It was a huge wheel, in fact, because I'm a big person.
Incredible.
Another fun fact about the Stanley Hotel is that it's the hotel in Dumb and Dumber. So, like, the scene where they're chasing each other up the stairs, those are like the stairs right there, and they have the moon landing newspaper in there. It's a pretty interesting hotel.
That's when they're in Aspen.
Yeah. Technically, that's in Estes Park.
Where the beer flows like wine and women flock like the salmon of Capistrano.
Yeah. I think if I had a gun to my head and I had to recite an entire movie line for line, it would probably be Dumb and Dumber. If I'm being honest.
When I was in my early 20s, I worked for a bunch of chefs, and we had to go to Aspen Food and Wine, and I started quoting it incessantly, and I was 20 years younger than the next youngest person that I worked with. We were a company of 4 people, and then we worked with a bunch of very stuffy chefs.
Great.
And so I just kept referencing Dumb and Dumber, and everybody was like, "What the fuck are you talking about? You need to calm down. And also, are you drunk or high right now?" I'm like, it's Tuesday in the office, so neither, but you guys just don't watch movies.
You don't know Dumb and Dumber?
Pure cinema.
Yeah, it's true. Classic film. Speaking of incessant references, I'm going to try to make as many as I can as we dive into the story of Tiffany in this episode. Because, believe it or not, I fucking love Tiffany, the singer. Character, we'll find out.
You know, Tiffany the singer definitely better than Tiffany the character. Tiffany the character, unfortunately, not much of a character.
No, and much like Tiffany the singer, her career kind of burns out and then fades away pretty quick in these issues.
Do they
She's
both
still
get an
going.
action
She
figure?
just released a single. Is there a Tiffany Darwish action figure? She did. She just released a single in June. It's okay. It's pretty good. It kind of sounds like a Miley Cyrus song.
It was probably written by the same Swedes.
Probably was.
So, yeah. Today we're getting into issues 44 and 45 of Spawn, which we're just going to call Tiffany, even though that's not the name of these two issues. They just are linked together because of the Tiffany the Angel of it all. Yeah. They do have separate names. We'll go through that when we post the episode. You'll just see like Tiffany because it's annoying to post the name. Like we're getting into an era where there will be kind of 4-part storylines that are not like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. It's like 4 individual titles, and I'm not going to type those all out to be the title of the episode because it's really long and annoying. So I've referenced it a bunch of times, the reading order. They are very good about putting like these are linked together. Their name is generally whatever the hell. And so then you're like, cool, these 4 issues are whatever the hell.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. We're using that as reference. Thanks again to Blake who created that. We use it as a resource all the time. If you Google Spawn reading order, you'll find it. And if you can throw some money that person's way, please do so. I think that there's been a link somewhere at some point. If we can find it, if I can find it, I will post it. But yeah, it's really good.
Before we get into it, I have one more quick note that I want to make. I won't belabor this point, but this is one of the first episodes we're recording since the allegations against Neil Gaiman broke. I bring that up because we're going to discuss Angela here. I am going to say simply that we absolutely believe the survivors and we detest and condemn abusers, and we will not be celebrating Neil Gaiman the person at any point. His work comes up through Spawn, so his name and his contributions may come up from time to time, but we will just want to make it clear from the start, we absolutely 100% believe the survivors and stand with them.
Yep, and if you're listening to past episodes where maybe we haven't said that, this is retroactive. So
right,
these are our feelings.
Yes,
we didn't know what had occurred at the time. Those were recorded before any of that stuff came out. We do record with a bit of a buffer, so we might have put out an episode like right around the time that does reference it, and we didn't say anything. That's because past us did not know. So even when you hear this, it is 2 months before it actually comes out. So thank you for giving us that grace.
Yeah,
and we're doing this so future editor me doesn't have to add a thing in.
Yeah, but yeah, we encourage everyone to stand with the survivors and take it seriously. And I hope they find peace and justice, whatever that is for them. Yeah.
100%. That's going to lead us to Spawn number 44, Avenger. Story by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Tony Daniel, inks by Kevin Conrad, copy editor Tom Warzikowski, letters by Lois Buhalis, color by Todd Broker, Roy Young, and a special thanks to Bo Smith. Dedicated to Jim Starlin.
Well, we know who Jim Starlin is, creator of Thanos. Thanos?
Thanos?
Creator of Thanos. Thanos. Shout out to Thanos. Thanos, creator of Thanos, revolutionized the character of Adam Warlock. A lot going on. Revolutionized the idea of cosmic space comics in a lot of ways. And great creator, interesting guy.
Jim Starlin, I really think, is one of those guys that doesn't get put in the same conversation as Jack Kirby. And I understand why.
But he's an heir to Kirby in a lot of ways.
that's what I was going to say, is that he is really taking the ball and running with it. He's yes-anding, and he's basically being told, like, this is a very abridged version of the creation of Thanos, but Thanos?
Now we can't stop saying it.
I know.
It's word poison. Thanos.
Thanos.
My name's frickin' Thanos over here.
The short version of the story is that once Jack started doing New Gods and created Darkseid, that Jim Shooter was like, we need a Darkseid. And Jim Starlin was like, yeah, all right, I guess I'll create something that's like kind of like that. And Thanos is kind of what comes out of it. In a weird way, and I know this will sound a little bit apocryphal, probably, but I think Infinity Gauntlet might be better than the New Gods stuff. I don't mean the fourth world as a whole.
I think it's tough to compare because by the time Infinity Gauntlet had come out, there was another, 15 years of storytelling in between and evolution of comics, to the point where the event comic had kind of been, if not quite quote unquote perfected, very much created at that point. So the idea
codified in some level
of telling a story that lasted only this number of issues and that was going to tell its story this much, Jack Kirby went into the fourth world thinking he had basically an open road. So, I think Infinity Gauntlet as a story is a singular story in a way that the fourth world Jack Kirby's fourth world kind of isn't. But that fourth world stuff is so beautiful and so poetic, and it's so hard to explain to someone who doesn't get it why it's so great, but it is. And I think that, like you said, Jim Starlin, one of the direct heirs of Kirby, I think taking the ball and running with it, especially when he gets into his cosmic phase in the mid-70s, which I think is post New Gods in most respects.
Yeah, if they don't overlap a bit, it is a little bit post. Yeah,
and then then there's guys like Keith Giffen, another guy who really took the ball and ran with it from Jack Kirby. R.I.P.
Favorite of mine. R.I.P.
Yeah. So anyway, Jim Starlin, Jack Kirby, and here we're getting into some cosmic stuff from Todd McFarlane and Tony Daniel et al. It's interesting there's a different letterer because I thought there were a couple of spots here that were rare Orzechowski L's, and we'll get into those.
Yeah, they are. The other thing too is that Orzechowski gets credited as like the longest running letterer on a book,
right?
But it's not Unbroken.
Right.
Because of this, I guess.
Yeah. So he might have been lettering. There might have been a limited series or something going on at this time that he could have been lettering too.
True. Yeah, I don't exactly know the release dates of a lot of stuff. A lot of this stuff. This is still we're still firmly in 1996 at this point.
Right.
But we are going to open with some cosmic stuff.
And I think there was a special thanks in the credits to someone, I can't remember the name.
Bo Smith.
Bo Smith. Okay, colorist Bo Smith.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that he did the planets and stuff here, because that's usually who gets the special thank you, is whoever's doing the digital backgrounds.
Yeah, and again, we're not seeing Ole Optics and Steve Olive here, so it's. Right. This is normal for this era, right? When we're bouncing between Tony Daniel and Greg Capullo issue to issue.
As we've talked about a lot, it's the double shipping issue and the rush to 50.
Yeah, it's this race to 50, which I get it on some level.
Has its ups and downs.
This opening page, I think Lois is doing a decent impression of Tom Orzechowski.
Most of this, the lettering works great. And welcome to the Comic Lettering Podcast. We're
going to talk about lettering a lot.
There are a couple spaces here, though. There's some places down the road where it's not delineated with boxes, and it's like a kind of light gray color.
It's so light,
orange,
and you can barely see it.
Yeah. An artistic choice that doesn't quite land. But that's down the road. We'll get there.
So these are not issues that I have physically. Because they are the first appearance of Tiffany. They are a little bit more expensive, and I didn't spend the money on them. I have the next arc, or next couple arcs, but I wonder what they look like in print. I wonder if they just pop a little bit better in print, and
maybe
because
so.
You and I are reading digital versions / a newer reprint,
right.
that they are not working as well. But
Right.
it is what it is.
Yeah, and we've seen some remastering throughout the first volume of the compendium here, which I've been reading from the whole time. But for the most part, it's pretty similar to the comic. Like there are points where even like typos are just carried over and stuff. So anyway, this first opening page is someone monologuing about wanting to be a top flight angel, an A flight angel, and decrying Angela for having hooked up with Spawn. Spawn and Angela were like, I think we're alone now. They hunkered down inside Spawn's cape, which was also in hell, and they hooked up. And yeah, now we're getting to Tiffany, who is an angel of a lesser caliber than the A-flight angels, like the A-listers, I guess, the first wave angels like Angela. And she wants to prove herself as the correct candidate to take over Angela's place in that A-flight by taking down Spawn. And she's telling her other fellow angels about this.
Yeah, the hierarchy of angels is a little odd, but I guess based on the aftermath of the Angela miniseries, we're to understand that the hierarchy of angels has been kind of
the balance of power has shifted in the hierarchy of the angels.
And so Tiffany's kind of this young upstart who's like, I think I'm better than the old guard, so I'm going to, make myself known. We've seen this kind of character a bunch of times throughout comic book history, right? With superhero stuff where it's like, this guy doesn't follow the rules, so I'm going to follow the rules, and I'm going to become the better version of whatever that is.
Or vice versa. It's very, honestly, very Top Gun in a lot of ways, It's an archetype, and I think it's interesting that they're kind of applying that Top Gun archetype to the angels, where there's this very structured hierarchy. There's something like that in Hell too, but it's much more organic with the Hellspawn, where it's kind of like, well, you get a Hellspawn and you get a Hellspawn, and now we all grow my army, and it's growing like a virus. It's like kind of just spreading and multiplying. Whereas in heaven, you can't necessarily just go take it, which is what these other angels are telling Tiffany. I think it's funny, before we move on, that they go almost everywhere except saying like Spawn and Angela, like they enmeshed costumes. Like
it does say they exchanged fluids.
Yeah, it says everything but they fucked. It says they exchanged fluids, which means that Spawn shot necroplasm, which is very heavy.
Which we do know that, but also I guess I don't want to keep going down this.
No, we won't. But this is the comic saying something in a weird way when it could have said like, I don't know, a lot of other stuff. It's just,
again, what's fun about this specifically as we cover it is that in the current Spawn comic, we've met a new character who seems like she may be the honestly, daughter of Angela and Spawn, which
I think that's the most comic thing possible. I think that rules.
It's crazy that it took this long.
Yeah, honestly, it is.
But then if you think about real time, it's like, all right, well, I guess in real time, she's in her like mid-20s.
Yeah.
Ish or whatever. I don't know. We'll get to the random soft reboots of Spawn also.
Yeah. Someday, years from now, you'll hear us talk about this new character.
Yeah. I forget what her name is, or if she even has a name yet. But
Smithany.
Yeah, it's Angeny.
Perfect.
Angeny?
Tifola.
Perfect. The thing I really feel about Tiffany is that she's everything about Angela that is extremely cool by half.
Yeah.
Like, her personality is annoying. Her design's like not that cool. All of the angels that we see in the Angela miniseries are way cooler looking than her. She has this sort of like Lori Petty tank girl thing.
Which rules, but not necessarily in this context.
Right. And so she just does feel like the young upstart who doesn't know what they're getting into.
Now, if she had more of the tank girl style of like a piecemeal kind of look, that would be kind of cool. Like she doesn't have her A1, priority A1 is what they say. She doesn't have her priority A1 armor yet or something. It just looks more 90s. It looks like Angela, but more like more extreme Angela or something. Her hair is bigger and wilder. Her costume's kind of more pointy.
I don't know that her hair is bigger though, because Angela has like big red long
That's
hair.
fair. That's fair. No,
like,
bigger is the wrong word. Her hair looks more 90s than Angela's like big like 80s glam hair.
Yeah, she feels like an X-Force offshoot. Like,
right.
Oh, you got cut from X-Force,
right?
For not being Boom Boom.
Kind of the image game a lot of the time at this time, which, you know, whatever. That's another tradition of comics. But yeah, no, her hair bigger than Angela's wrong, because Angela's hair is massive. It's like Medusa or something.
It rules.
Tiffany's hair, yeah, it's great. Tiffany has that like 90s like spiky front with the big long ponytail in the back, and it looks almost like the Misfits from Gem and the Holograms or something.
She looks like Fabian Cortez.
Yeah, yes.
And we learn that Tiffany has beaten all of Angela's records, whatever those are, in the various School of Angels.
Her flight records and stuff, she says.
Right. This is the Top Gun-ness of it all, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, that's kind of cool. Again, I think applying that to the Angels is cool. It kind of makes sense. They're very militaristic. I like that attitude coming through here. Honestly, I actually don't hate this two-parter. I don't hate the story of Tiffany here. I don't actually know whether it ends here or not, but I think they're just kind of wasting Angels, throwing them at Spawn. Having them stolen by lawsuits, whatever it is. Speaking of Spawn, we catch up with him. We find out it's dusk on Earth. And like we learned in the last issue, Spawn is replenished by the night things, the creatures of the dark, which are, as we've learned, inherently evil. Worms, rats, spiders, bears, I guess. Anything that's nocturnal carries wolves. Within it wolves, absolutely wolves. Couldn't be more wolves. Carries within it.
There are two wolves inside Spawn.
Yes, and one of them is evil, and the other one is apparently also evil, because that's what nourishes him, is the presence of these evil creatures. He's still stitching himself back together from when the curse cut him apart.
I have a question for you, George.
Yes.
Do you like this?
Well, that's an interesting question, Pierce. I think that it's... I do and I don't. 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 I do like it because it's very horror, and anytime Spawn goes into a place of like real horror, I think it's great, and I think that works for its advantage. I liked it previously. The way it was depicted was like kind of more universal horror. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I think
all black and white with like that splash of color every once in a while.
I do think that there's something stupid about it, about like the night is evil, and in the dark, things that are evil are thriving and bringing their power. And then also, in the earth is the most darkest place, so that's where the darkest and most evil things, worms, are found.
Right.
I guess there's something very much like heaven's in the sky, hell is down below in the earth about it. It feels very childlike in a way. Like,
I think it's too much of a good guys versus bad guys thing. That is frustrating because Spawn is, first of all, he sort of plays both sides frequently, and also the dichotomy already set up about the angels and about heaven that we've seen, where like God calls Spawn the one.
Yeah.
Means that there's a lot of ambiguity towards the sort of good and evil paradigm within heaven itself, right? The fact that God is not like, zap, you're dead. The fact that God's like, no, he's the one. Like, there's something here. Todd has kind of seeded a thing, and I think he has no understanding of where it's supposed to go. And I know that we're racing towards this like anniversary issue, and that will, I've read ahead a little bit, but that will start to reveal more. This feels like it is contradicting what's been built up before.
Well, I don't know that it's contradicting. I think it's just not as elegant as some of that stuff. And here's why I think that's actually kind of interesting. because we know that Todd doesn't really, he said before, the story he's trying to tell isn't necessarily a story about angels and demons. But this
Right.
is Todd moving into that world in a way this is his story of that. And this is something that he's adding to the mythology that isn't taken straight from like something Alan Moore or Neil Gaiman or Grant Morrison wrote. It's something that that Todd McFarlane is coming up with on its own here. And I think that's kind of cool about it. I think that's adding something. I think the idea that like there are things that can replenish Spawn on Earth is also interesting. I think he's trying to find a way to bring Spawn back to full health that is sort of horrible and kind of creepy and dark. Because again, Spawn was vivisected, cut apart, and separated from his costume by the curse. The costume pulled all of Al Simmons' body parts back together, and now, as we can see in this page of Spawn with his arms bare, like all skeletal, the costume is using the dark force, evil energy of these things to rebuild his body.
Can I say that panel is the most 8th grade art class ass panel that I think I've ever seen?
I do like the hairs on top of Spawn's head.
I like that.
I think it's cool. It does also look like something I drew in above my math notes, like instead of taking.
There's something
notes
about it that is just, I don't know. Maybe it's the coloring and the extreme like greens around his hands. There's something about it that just also just doesn't. It might also be that he's like so skinny, but just doesn't really clock right.
It works okay. Like the storytelling of it works. The rendering of it doesn't make me go like, "Oh, that's badass." That's the coloring. Also, again, very literal here. The sunset colors are fine. It just doesn't.
I hate the computer coloring in the background too. That weird, like gooey.
Well, and here's where it starts to clash with the lettering, which goes for like this sort of blue gray kind of color on top of the bright orange of the backgrounds. Just clashes. This would look cooler if it was, black and white like the other style.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they didn't want to repeat that motif, and I get it. I do also want to say there is something, like you said, that it kind of dumbs down the conflict of heaven and hell in a way that also plays into like language stereotypes that I kind of bristle at now. I tend to bristle at the correspondence always of like dark and evil and these sort of little language signifiers because they feel cliche in a way that also feels like it's been taken out of context literarily into a larger real world like sort of association for a lot of people that it's hard to break. And I it's just one of those things that just pings to me. No, I'm not trying to like cancel it or some shit because of how I feel.
Trying to cancel the night. I get it.
20 years later, I would never cancel the night. I am very nocturnal. But
what's interesting about it is that it's so simplistic that it does try to apply these things when we already have a character like Batman. Batman's whole thing is that he uses.
He is the night.
He is darkness. He is the night. He is. He's the Dark Knight, right?
Yeah.
And I think in these 2 issues, we get like a Dark Knight reference. But so it was stupid to be so simplistic about it because especially it's one of the things that influences Spawn is fucking Batman. So like, we already know that like you can be an Avenger of the Night and yet be kind of good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I don't hate the motif necessarily because I like Spawn and the night, like nocturnal creatures all coming together. It's very horror. I will say something that just occurred to me as we were flipping through this. On the next page, after the like Spawn's arms are out, where he's sitting on top of the hill with again a 3-wolf moon right here, full on 3-wolf moon in this panel.
I would wear that t-shirt.
Hell yeah, I would. But it says right there, the creatures of the dark, a blood moon. The soil itself, all bring forth their dark cash of evil to the supplicant, a Hellspawn weekend. But that is not a blood moon back there. That's a setting sun.
It's very weird. It's like, honestly, I think the page would be sick if it was a blood moon.
I was about to say it would look dope.
I
It
would
looks
love
so
for
great.
somebody, hey, listeners, if you want to recolor
I know
this page of
sometimes
Spawn
that can
44.
be considered gauche, but just as an exercise.
Just as an exercise, just because I'm curious to see what it would look like.
Yes.
Honestly, you know what? Fuck it. Todd Broker, if you want to get back in here, you want to take another pass, that'd be cool.
I will say I like the wolves. I like Spawn all hunched over. I like the skull upturned, like his skull out of his fucking costume. Like his skull is on the ground in front of him, I think. Or maybe that's no, he's finding that in the ground. That's what it is.
He's finding that one.
The storytelling there is weird.
I actually really loved the panel before with his like sort of crying eyes almost.
As he looks at the skull and he says, worms, maggots, the dregs of a dark earth were bones and blood of the dead enrich the hungry dirt. I kind of like it.
A rib-sticking meal that will again enmesh the protective layer with its vessel. You know what?
Todd does a good job with the horror language.
Yeah, I think that it's taken him a little while to get there, but you know what? I have a lot of fun with the narration here. I don't know that Tony Daniel's the best guy to deliver on this script.
Well, I think that's the first page of the next issue will prove that, unfortunately.
I know. But I think Capullo is a little bit more locked in
on that horror side. And he gets the like eaten away, grimy, without it looking kind of under rendered. That said, I like this. Okay. It took me a minute to understand exactly what was happening here because I thought it was his costume like engulfing the skull because there's like his hands are never drawn. There's no Todd McFarlane hand stuff here. But what he does is he picks up the skull, love the skull full of worms, and then he dumps it on his head and all the green necroplasm and worms all like pouring down over him and like his open mouth and shit. That page rules.
Love the open mouth onto the costume. The costume
really sells. Cool. So really good. Cool. The coloring on this next page, where it's purpley, much more interesting.
Super cool.
And I like
the purple and oranges. I don't love the smoke effects in the background.
Yeah, sometimes it makes you. It doesn't quite work right. I do like the composition here. I think that it's Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad doing their best to do that kind of Todd McFarlane like abstract composition together, and I like that they're keeping that motif in Spawn for these kind of like horror fueled moments. Spawn laying on his back there, just Wanda. But again, not a blood moon. The sun is setting.
There's a lot of the sun is clearly setting, and then
but there's a moon in the previous panel. It's just a weird kind of mishmash of like times and tones.
Yeah, and also I don't even really love those gradients behind the Wanda page or Wanda panel. Like,
no, I was gonna say it would look cooler if it was a little more flat or like a different color.
We're exactly in the era of computer coloring still being something that not everybody's figured out perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's just, we sort of have to let it rock. Like,
yeah, you just got to let it be what it is. And, you know, we can look back at it and at least critique, if not like, oh, they didn't do like what we would have done in 2024. They didn't use maybe the best technique that was available at the time.
Yeah. I think that when the story, and we'll see this in this next kind of Sam and Twitch scene, when the story doesn't call for a lot of artistry, the colors end up being a lot better. That we still get a little bit of weird gradient stuff that I don't love, but I love like this panel of Twitch kind of reacting with the teal behind it. The teal's a weird choice because that doesn't exist.
That's carrying over from the previous issues with them where we were seeing them with Chief Banks. And again, more Sam eating, this time roach-infested old pizza. His apartment is disgusting here. But something I think that I like about this little sequence, because it's a 2-page sequence of Sam and Twitch discussing that they've lost their jobs because of Chief Banks, who is now dead, as we saw last issue, and is now being blamed for everything that Jason Wynn actually manipulated. the thing I like about this is that they are being used, once again, Sam and Twitch are being used as a counterpoint to the metaphysical side of Spawn, because they're also like, okay, well, if we can find Spawn and get answers about what happened with the files and why things didn't go how we expected and what to do next, then our career can take its next step and we can get back to that next level. Same thing that Tiffany was saying. If I can find Spawn and take down this Hellspawn that consorted with Angela, then I can take my career to the next level. It's a parallel that's been used a lot, but I like that Todd McFarlane is keeping that kind of usage of Sam and Twitch as the other side of the coin, the human and more earthly side of the coin.
Yeah, he's kind of honing in on the idea that he can create these parallel narratives that have something in common that can sort of, they don't have to, but they can both culminate in Spawn. And they will in some way. They don't end up happening to intersect with Spawn at the same time. But we've been frustrated before by Sam and Twitch just like not doing their jobs well enough, you know?
I think I like that they're saying, okay, well, now we're just going to figure out what the deal is with Spawn. We're going to nail that down because that seems to be the missing element in all of this is answers about him. And again, it's that thing that we saw over like 25 issues the first time where Sam and Twitch and Spawn are set on different sides of a goal and they keep moving towards it. Well, now we just have Sam and Twitch moving closer and closer to Spawn. And I like that. I like that they're getting more proactive. And we'll see a little bit more about that soon because whatever happens, they're going to stick together as partners.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of cartooning, I think these scenes are solid. I think they were laid out fairly well. Again, I don't love the sort of Sam eating all the time stuff, but I think it's just that it's become such a thing in this book that I'm sort of like, I'm at this point, I'm just sort of grossed out by it. Like
grossed out by the fat phobia of it to me. And the, like just associating a person with a larger body with gluttony so strongly is, I don't know. Again, it's a thing I also tend to bristle at. Even when, like, there have been times when it kind of works for the scene, having it be every scene is starting to feel pointed in a way 100%. That I don't think that Todd McFarlane necessarily means. I don't think he's trying to, like, have a commentary on fat people, but he is.
I think it's just a honeymooners thing. Yeah, like, I think he's just like
Laurel and Hardy. He's
Barney just like, oh, this Fred. Is funny.
Yeah.
So I just will do it. And it's not, I don't think he's thinking of it any further than that.
No, it's a comedic archetype to him, I think.
Yeah. And so we're not holding that against you, Todd Father. But it
does feel a little shitty sometimes in the script.
It does. And I think also, too, the way that it's rendered by artists sometimes, I get that it's a point at which they get to maybe have a little bit of fun. The visual gag of, like, the roaches and stuff is, like, it's gross.
Yeah.
It's very gross. I get that it's a little bit fun to draw. Like, it's a little bit more fun to draw the gag that way.
It's very Looney Tunes, again. Yeah. It's very, like, very wacky in a way. And, like, Sam's not eating roaches. He's eating... But, nonetheless, the focus on it's starting to wear a little thin. It would be cool to learn more about who Sam is besides that he fucking is gross.
The craziest panel is the one where we only see Sam's teeth.
Yeah.
As he's like, I'm like, oh my God, wait, we reserved that look for like Spawn and like villains.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Sam chomping down on some pizza has just the teeth is unnecessary.
It puts a weird horror quality to it.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's again, though, we're the ones going into sort of the minutia of this in a way that, like, I guess when you have to like just spit out 20 pages in a month, maybe you don't think about it that way. So, you know.
Speaking of, though, horror motif, I like these next two pages, the coloring on these better. Even the gray gradients in the background, I think
it works.
Because you have those really bold, striking blacks up front. That panel of Wanda with the bats looks really cool.
Super cool.
Spawn sitting there with the giant bear with the red glowing eyes. Again, when it's black and white with that red accent, it looks kind of sick. Has more vision.
And we get my favorite thing.
That's right. The power bar.
Get Power bar.
Because something's happened with Spawn. He's now back together. He's finally bringing himself together. And just as he's bringing himself together, Tiffany shows up and she saw him standing there. And that's another Tiffany song. And yes, indeed. And as Spawn is replenishing himself off the energy of the bear, Angela, Tiffany.
Which, by the way, the way that he gets the energy off the bear seems like he doesn't kill animals.
No,
he only sucks out their evil.
They bring him their evil force,
right? And then he lets them go. Like, he doesn't kill animals.
I wish this molding, this panel at the top that's like the merging of Spawn's face
would be a very cool toy.
It would. I also wish it looked a little cooler. Like, I wish the execution was a little more fluid. It looks like on Ink Master when someone doesn't quite get the assignment. And then they're like, well, you kind of just drew like most of a bear and then like part of Spawn's head over here. Like, that's kind of what it, but I like the concept. I like the colors on this page, the purples, the pink in the bear's eye really works. But then Tiffany shows up and blows up the bear with a laser gun. Bloosh.
I will say, it's not clear.
Kind of an incredible panel.
It's not clear in that panel that it's a laser gun, and also the way that, I guess, like, Tony Daniel was told most of the bear gets incinerated.
The legs and arms just fly out. It looks kind of great.
And also, Bloosh is the worst lettering that we've seen in the entirety.
It implies that like the bear just popped like a balloon or something.
Not to put this on Lois, the new letterer on this book, even though Tom Warzikowski is the editor. So like,
Warzikowski would have done something a little different with it, I think. But I actually kind of like it. It looks really cartoony.
I think it's crazy.
Again, it looks very Looney Tunes, which
it just feels crazy. Like, after the last page and a half, to like, if you look at the page, like the panel of like the bear and Spawn's
cowering as the bear sees Tiffany.
Yeah, and then you're just like, Bloosh, like, it's so crazy.
Yeah, Tiffany shows up and she admonishes Spawn for hooking up with Angela, who she now calls his once heavenly concubine. She says that she's been contaminated by his hell scum.
Ugh.
Which is, wow. She says she's a hell cast.
I like that her pouch garters have little pouches.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But then I like on the other leg that you see how they're attached. I feel like a thing often in 90s comics is just pouches all the way around, and you're like, how the fuck do those work? And it's like, nope, there's a buckle. There's a buckle.
There's a buckle.
There's a
right
buckle.
there. There's a buckle right there. She's shooting her gun at Spawn, which Angels with Guns sounds like a ska band or something.
Angels with Scuns?
Well, Scangels.
Scon? Nope.
No.
Anyway.
The Scon Unity.
The
Hellspawn. Now that's the Spawn ska band that we're not going to make. Tiffany says that Angela is now a Hellcast, which is one step closer to being Hellspawn. Assumedly, that means that she's technically damned to hell.
And also that we have any understanding what that means.
Yeah.
Like, that.
Well, she says a Hellcast, the next step to Hellspawn.
I know, but also we just met her. We don't know that anything that she's saying is real, because also anything that's been said in this comic feels like it gets contradicted like pretty quickly after.
Yeah. I think that's Todd just wanting to throw another word in there, like another term. I don't hate it. Hellcast makes sense, at least. At least it's a word you can deduce.
That's
like
true.
She's being cast to hell.
And I guess in this case, it is getting explained immediately.
But also, though, you have a point that the question is that like an official thing? Is she like officially now like on like one notch closer? Like the the midnight, the doomsday clock clicks one closer to midnight or something.
Right, because we don't get that in the Angela miniseries. Like, we don't get
Right.
like a thing where like, oh no, she's getting closer to becoming Hellspawn now through her interactions.
Or is it just her using a term that angels use for people who are going to hell and saying like, yeah, you might as well be as good as a Hellspawn. Which
Also, Tiffany kind of a cop.
Yeah, Tiffany definitely a cop. And she's also being like, get up, bitch, let me beat you standing up. And he's like, she's like, oh my God. Yeah, Tiffany's like, get up, you and me were made to be in war. And he's like, well, if you keep fighting me, my suit is gonna fight you no matter what you do. And she's like, well, I want you to fight me. She pulls out her like razor blade knuckle dusters. She's bashing him stabbing him with her sword. She throws him off panel. And off panel, we see on the next page, it's almost like a transition. We see the clown sitting in garbage, much like Spawn does, laughing. He's talking about how screwed Spawn is again now that Tiffany's there, another angel on his case. And he's kind of like, well, either way, this is going to be great. It's got to be my friggin' birthday. I love this transformation sequence we get, this
super
sequence.
Fun.
Tony Daniel nails it from the transformation from clown to violator. It picks up, you have that first panel of him laying in the trash with his mouth wide open with his big teeth, and then the teeth become the kind of focus of how it turns into the transformation sequence. I really like that. It's a very American Werewolf in London kind of sequence here.
I think that this issue doesn't really play to Tony Daniel's strengths until it does.
When he nails it, he nails it.
Yeah, and then elsewhere, you're sort of like, okay.
And I think Tony Daniel is an artist who's growing into Spawn. He's kind of thrown in by the seat of his pants on a lot of this. And he doesn't, again, we've said it before, in a lot of these pages and these issues that he's doing, he doesn't have the benefit that Greg Capullo has had of being inked by or inking Todd McFarlane kind of interchangeably at some points, where they're really enmeshing their styles and growing together. And also where he's learning from Todd McFarlane and his, not only his knowledge as a creator and his talent as a creator, but his philosophy for the storytelling of Spawn.
Agreed.
So,
and also, I think that Todd, especially early on, smooths out a lot of what we might not have liked about Capullo.
Right.
Because,
exactly.
so like we got this sort of seamless transition into, oh, this is a Capullo page versus this is a Todd and Capullo page
versus whatever.
This is a pure Todd page.
We're just seeing, this creative team, the side creative team, kind of still also figuring each other out. And this is also thankfully at a time when a lot of times, in a lot of cases, you had those ongoing pairings on a comic where like Tony Daniel and, oh my God, why is the inker suddenly blank?
Kevin Conrad?
Kevin Conrad, thank you. I kept wanting to say Kevin Nolan, and that's not right. Kevin Conrad.
No. That would be cool, though.
It would be sick. They're also learning with each other. They have time in this book to figure it out. I think kind of comparing the two is a little bit of a false dichotomy for that reason, but I think we also have to compare them because this is the back and forth of Spawn that's happening right now. We're being asked to compare them bi-weekly, even contemporaneously we would have been comparing them. So,
especially too because this is an arc where they are both going to sort of play into it. So
yeah.
But I love all the clown stuff, and I love the voodoo dolls.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. And also, is he sitting on Spawn's throne?
Yes, he is.
He's hanging out in Rat City, sitting on Spawn's throne while
Super
Spawn's
cool.
off in West Virginia, I think it was, or something, somewhere on his way home. But speaking of Spawn, we cut back to him, and it says, is it minutes or seconds, minutes, hours? Reality is blurred, and then he regains some focus. And we see that what's happened to Spawn is that when Tiffany threw him off panel, he landed on a huge spike, and once again, he's been impaled through the chest. If he had
Dude
a heart,
loves getting impaled through the chest.
He has always got that big gap in his chest. It is just, boy, that's a chronic condition for our friend Al Simmons here. And so we learn that on the next page, Tiffany raises her blade, lifts her sword and says, I'm going to decapitate you because that's the one thing that can kill someone who's dead. I can't remember if we've seen Al Simmons get decapitated yet.
We haven't.
I didn't think so. Chris got almost there.
We have had mention of this, though, in Angela's Spawn killing guide.
Right, that's right.
Back in 9.
That's right. So that comes back, and she raises her sword. She says, I'm going to kill you and take your head, and I'll make sure Angela holds it before she dies. This last panel of Tiffany, not great. You're going to have a hard time decapitating someone with your sword raised with your arms back behind your head like that, upside down. You're only going to, she's going to seppuku if she does that. It's
behind her head, but also in front of her.
It is
crazy.
It's a weird positioning.
Also, I will say, in a bunch of this page, the weird little glints off the sword. Why are they there?
Moonlight. They can't fight the moonlight.
But why even bother?
I don't know. Because it renders something more. I mean, I don't hate them. It's because it puts the focus on the sword and lets you know this is a razor sharp, that sheen of the light off the knife's edge that lets you know this is going to be a vicious cut, I think is the point. Puts the focus on the blade.
I kind of don't hate but part of you stays here, your head, decapitation, the only way to permanently kill an undead. I like those 4 panels a lot.
The rendering of the last panel, in terms of how it's drawn, takes away some of the focus because it's kind of just okay, well, you had to cram this in there and you couldn't figure out how to have the sword be in the panel and not facing down. It just doesn't quite work.
Yeah. Which brings us to Spawn issue number 45. And I'll get into those credits. This is going to be called Warriors. Story by Todd McFarlane. Pencils by Greg Capullo. Inks by Todd McFarlane. Copy editor and letters by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin. Special thanks to Danny Meeke. Dedicated to Jerry Siegel.
All right.
So,
co-creator of Superman.
Not clear why on this one.
Okay.
But okay.
Just sometimes it doesn't necessarily correspond. Oh, you know what? He might have passed away around this time.
Oh, when did he pass?
Let's find out.
Jerry Siegel pass. R.I.P. to a great.
Yeah, January 28th, 1996.
Oh, so yeah, he would have passed around this.
Yeah, it would have been in honor of his memory. Yeah, and of course, nice. I will say that it's probably not a coincidence that Todd McFarlane wanted to pay homage to him either, because the fight that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster had to claim any ownership and any right to the profits drawn by Superman, the most popular and successful comic book character of all time,
right.
$1 billion industry, I'm sure. They had to fight for the barest scraps, and there was that lawsuit recently that ended with the Action Comics #1 version reverting to their control, and of course that's the version that will go into public domain soon. So even that they're being it's a whole thing. But the fight for creators' rights starts with Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and that's something that's elemental to Todd McFarlane's career. We wouldn't be reading Spawn if he wasn't also a person who believes strongly in the fight for creators' rights. Sometimes he mishandles that fight. Sometimes he makes mistakes in terms of how he treats other creators himself. I don't think necessarily intentionally, but also, functionally. And I think, though, that that's a pretty important dedication, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, unlike Spawn, we're all human.
That's right.
So that said, we kind of said it about the last issue, but first page of this one, Salams.
The thing about cool. it fucking whips. This is the Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane version of Spawn impaled on this big, weird, spiny tree. God, I kind of feel bad a little bit because it's really just seeing the superlative art team rendering something that Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad drew pretty much exactly in the previous issue, but in a way that just shows you the difference between what Capullo and McFarlane are capable of at this time.
And also too, it allows Todd to do his favorite thing, which is the opening splash page, with a lot of narration.
Yeah, and it's all focused,
but in a way that you're like, yeah, man, I'm so in. It
lettering
looks so
here
cool.
looks great. The lettering choices on this page are better than some of the ones in the previous issue. The coloring,
the cloud
moon
effects look good.
The stars coming off the moon through the clouds,
super cool.
It's a really nice page.
There's like a vague pinkness to the moon.
Yeah,
that I think helps offset the clouds.
Yes.
And then when you get the very dark blacks of Spawn's costume, there's just great contrast across the page. Yeah, really, really good stuff.
So the next page, though, this drawing of Tiffany is picking up where the one we saw by Tony Daniel in the last issue left off. She's like leaping through the air in a weird way with her sword. Like, I don't even understand how she's physically holding it like that.
I think also Capullo's a little bit better at the 90s bad girl thing.
It does look a little more like the way he draws angels. The costume has a little bit more of the busyness to it. And of course, we've got Spawn's head laid back, framing the front of the shot. I like the framing of it. The rendering of Tiffany, again, just kind of feels like a little too 90s, like a little too, like, I wouldn't put it in the quality of like the bad comic art Tumblr level, but like the posing's a little like...
It's a lot.
You didn't get a human to do that. You couldn't, you know?
You could if they were like sitting on a couch.
Yeah,
you could sit on a couch that way. I don't know how you jump that way.
Exactly. Anyway, she swipes down her blade and takes off Spawn's head, or so it seems. As she picks up her prize, his decapitated head, it kind of disintegrates into a pile of worms, which is pretty badass. And we learn that Spawn used the worms that were currently in filling his costume, stitching his body back together to create a fake head
next to his normal head.
So he like stuck his head in his costume like a turtle, I guess, and she cut off the head made of maggots and worms, and like they're all falling all over her face. It looks cool. This next page where Spawn's on the attack, pulling himself off the tree, and she's like down getting covered by like the dirt and the worms and shit, looks awesome.
It's super weird because it's like, well, why is the grass attacking her? But I sort of don't care.
I think it's because like all the stuff is now growing over her arm, you see?
Yeah.
Like you see in the page right before that, she goes, "It's not real. The damn thing is using magic." The worms are like crawling up her arm. So I think it's an extension of that. They're starting to crawl up her arm and her leg.
Looks cool as hell. Spawn looks sick. His huge fucking spiky gauntlet, his
weird creepy arm.
Yeah.
Craig Capullo is taking this opportunity to push some aspects of Spawn's anatomy that I really like that creepy claw hand.
The other thing that I think he's incredible at, that I think that Tony Daniel doesn't nail always, I love this next panel and next page where he sort of tackles her. And he uses instead of using action lines, he uses the cape to show the momentum.
Yeah.
And he treats the cape as action lines, essentially.
We get that nice like Fibonacci sequence of cape spikes.
It's great.
It looks great. It looks awesome. And it makes Spawn look very predatory there.
Yeah.
They're all wrapped up in his cape and it's got that cool angle. And he uses the shape, that weird curled shape of that tree, to kind of sell the storytelling and the motion of that as well.
And also the weird moon kind of looking like a face.
Or a Death Star.
Yeah. Super weird.
It's great, though. It's cool. Great. This panel of Tiffany at the bottom here, one of my favorite renderings of her in this whole two-parter. where she's like got her sword down in front of her in the defensive position. You can see Greg Capullo really goes all out with like the details and the little baubles and bits. I like this rendering of her costume really well. It looks so successful in ways that other drawings of it have failed.
I also really love Spawn's sort of reaction to how Tiffany feels about Angela, where he says Angela was too good for your god.
Yeah.
Which, that is a fucking line. Like,
that's
let's
pretty cool.
go.
That's pretty
super cool. And especially in this, like, we're in this weird section of like, I think every time that Al has to like put himself back together, he just sort of sucks as a character because he's like recovering.
Yeah.
And this fight kind of gets him back on his horse a lot.
Yeah, it does. And this will be how he winds up getting home eventually soon by the end of this issue. This is forcing his costume to kind of use the maggots and the worms to rebuild his body. And we'll see more of that again by the end of this issue. I think this is my favorite version of Spawn / Al has to be healed, because I just like how he was cut up and the costume like grabbed him and it's all jumbled up and it's figuring out how to put him together. I like when they've leaned into that, even when Tony Daniel in the last issue wasn't that successful with that one rendering of it, you know, where his arms are out. I liked that they were showing it, and I liked that it was like, I liked that motif and that style. I thought it was cool. I think it's cool that his costume's like a bag of bones filled with necroplasm and worms.
Yeah, I mean, I really have to call out, after that big, like, kind of triumphant pose for Angela, I love the next page.
Yeah, and so
I love it. She's like, what? And the narration just rules. A moment she'd taken her eye off him for only a moment. Now the night wind howls, resonating in all directions. The rogue angel prepares for anything or everything. Show yourself, demon. It does. Underground, where madness reigns. Yeah. From the one direction she hadn't prepared for, she'd been taught that in the absence of sunlight dwells evil, and that the greatest evil lives below, underground in eternal blackness, where God's grace is forbidden forever, as like the chains and the cape envelop her.
And that's why I kind of like that little bit in the previous page where the stuff's growing up under her, because it kind of presages this moment where Spawn's cape bursts up from under the ground because he's kind of burrowed under her. And he's now full on raging with the cape and the chains, and he's got her up in the air and he's throwing her around. She's blasting him with the holy fire, the celestial fire. And just as Spawn is getting blasted again through the chest, and she's thinking about how it says she's praying she can gain the advantage and somehow end this unholy battle. We cut to our first check-in with the talking heads in this arc. The CNN head is laying out that it's the funeral of Chief Lewis Banks. She calls him the NYPD's darkest night, or is that the E Entertainment guy?
The darkest night line is from the E Entertainment guy, the first queer character in
That's
Spawn.
Right. Yes, they buried their darkest night. They're all talking about it. She lays out that he moved from the CIA to the New York offices, and that the attacks on the CIA are being blamed on him. It says that, you know, all this stuff, the E guy is basically saying that the funeral was very tasteful and small. The NYPD buried its darkest night with only a motorcycle for a motorcade. And then the KGIN4 conspiracy guy, that's what he's on now, is basically saying that, are we to believe that Chief Banks trained and operated and funded his own private military capable of launching these attacks? And also the answer is he was the chief of the NYPD, so I guess he absolutely was. Because we know what the New York Police Department...
What's really funny about the conspiracy guy is that he's actually pretty spot on most of the time.
Yeah, there are ways that he twists it. Like, there are things that he's pointing out, but Yeah,
He's saying it in a crazy way,
yeah, in a way
but you're
that's not
like, oh man, you're like pretty close.
the worst
to
guy you know. Kind of made a point. Yeah,
Yeah,
um,
100%.
yeah.
Who plays him in the movie?
Who plays him in the movie? Oh God,
Like
John
if they had
Goodman.
to get a real
A real
like news,
conspiracy guy?
if they had to get real newscasters for all three of these,
I don't know. You don't want anybody like that around.
that's a good point.
You're not going to cast like Alex Jones unless you're Richard Linklater, I guess.
It would be a little funny if it's Alex Jones though.
He doesn't need the payday.
I agree.
Don't give it to him.
Who are the other two though?
Alex Jones. I don't know.
It's probably it's unfortunately we're whitewashing the first one, and it's Rachel Maddow.
Ugh.
It's supposed to be Connie Chung. I feel like
Yeah.
that's
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's meant to be Connie Chung.
It's supposed to be Connie Chung, like based on the era, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think the problem is that like they're all really just caricatures. So trying to put a real
George, we
news
have to
person
think
in
about
is
these things because
underselling
there's
it.
a Spawn movie coming out. It's
That's
coming
right.
out. It has a script with a title, okay?
That's right.
And people are going to be wondering what we think about it. Okay, we're the second most popular Spawn podcast on the internet.
That's
so,
right.
By the time that this comes out, we'll still be the second most popular
That's
podcast
right.
on the internet.
That's right. Second most popular podcast.
Shout out to Regarding Spawn.
Regarding Spawn, our buddies. In the Spawn community.
And the Spawn community.
Oh, I've given up on it working.
I think it's I think it's actually working now.
It's starting to work, yeah. So Sam and Twitch are back at their apartment. We're checking in with them. They are fretting over money because, you know, they've been fired. Twitch's wife doesn't know yet that he doesn't have a job. He's like, well, the funny thing is, if I told her, she probably would trust me. She probably wouldn't even be angry, but I don't want to let her down. That's this masculine thing in me. And Sam is like, well, look, I've always wanted a family. I've always wanted a wife and kids, but that's not something I'm going to have. That's something you already have. And I've got something that I've been saving for this pipe dream. He throws him a tub of Crisco, and it's just like the bear. He opens it, and it's full of cash that Sam says he wants to use to start their own private detective agency. And Twitch...
Spawn, a big influence on the bear.
That's right. Both take place in New York City. The Bear, famously a very New York City show, selling those New York City beef sandwiches.
Of course.
And the Big Apple.
You know, we've talked a lot about how I think Sam and Twitch are probably our favorite characters. And this is another scene where I'm like, yeah, these two fucking rule. Like, they bring a more human element to this that is not directly related to Spawn the way that Terry and Wanda are.
Yeah.
That, like, really helps ground the story. I understand why this new movie is going to be, like, from the perspective of Twitch, trying to figure out what Spawn is while also investigating some murders. Because it's like, yeah, there's two characters that you can kind of relate to. Yeah. And it's Sam and Twitch.
And also, in a way, kind of lifting what was sort of intended to be the meta plot of the first big arc of Spawn. I will say, want to give credit. We were just talking about how we wish there was a scene where Sam was not eating. Not eating in this one. He is clipping his fingernails, still being gross, but, you know, some people are.
He's got his butt crack out.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I do too. I can't help it. But there is this moment where it kind of pays off a little bit, where he goes and he walks over to the fridge, and it looks like he's going to get something to eat, and instead he gets that jar of money that he's been hiding in there.
I'm going to say something that will maybe sound a little bit funny, but like Greg Capullo draws Sam hot.
I mean, he kind of does.
Does that make sense? Like, I'm specifically thinking about the panel where he's got his like hand on Twitch's shoulder.
Yeah.
Dude's got like, kind of guns.
He's kind of a zaddy, as they say.
Yeah, he's like looking. He like kind of looks good, and I think that's the thing is like he kind of Capullo treats him with some respect here, and it is a moment This is a scene also where Sam is like stepping up to the plate.
Yeah.
We're so used to him seeming like schlubby and like eating food and like, I mean, also probably depressed, right? Like that's who he
absolutely.
is.
Well, and you can see that he's let himself go a little bit. I like it. I do like.
But his body language in this scene is different, you know? And it's almost like he kind of gets like a superhero moment. That's sort of like looking over his shoulder. I'll be right back. Yeah. You know, like, no, it's really good. I don't know that it was intentional. Maybe I'm seeing it through like 2024 eyes where I'm just like.
No, but I mean, when you look at that panel where he says, I'll be right back, he's got that playfulness in his eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like I know that it gets undercut by his butt crack being out in the very next panel, maybe, but.
Nonetheless, though, there is something to what you're saying. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
So on the next 2 pages, again, love the art on the next 2 pages. Love the purple and green motif of the coloring. Love the way that green coloring goes from the bottom panel of the left page to the top of the right page, like on that big angle. Very nice use of that, like cross page, like visual storytelling. I want to say though. This is another moment where it's like, oh, this has a name, I guess. This thing we're about to see has a name, and it's a whole part of lore instead of just a thing Spawn does. It feels like in the 60s when Iron Man would be like, oh, I just have to use my cosmographic spectrometer. And you'd be like, oh, you have that. Okay.
Great. Perfect.
And Spawn does this thing that legend has it is called the quote-unquote Black Dispersal, which sounds like something the NYPD is trying to do, or what happens is...
listen, the details may differ in region, but the act remains fairly consistent.
That's right. What happens is Spawn shoots this blast of green energy at Tiffany, and we see his meter go down just a little bit. See the meter again. And it hits her, but she's like... You didn't do anything. Why do you gloat? Your pathetic energy stream wasn't nearly strong enough. You failed once again. But she's falling for the oldest trick in the book, because what's happened is the Black Dispersal marks its target, in this case Tiffany, with the energy of darkness that draws the creatures of the night to her, just like they were drawn to Spawn.
Pretty cool.
It is a cool idea. I think it's stupid that it's like, this is called the Black Dispersal. Like,
very dumb.
It can't just be a thing Spawn does. But it's what happens is it basically marks her with the scent of evil, but instead of replenishing her and nourishing her with their energy, the animals of the night, including these bears and these wolves,
will try to attack her.
They all leap over her. And as they're attacking her, snakes, everything's... She tries to run away, and Spawn's chains snare her. And we get this dope panel of Spawn's cape splayed out like a bat, which just looks awesome.
We're also speeding through the bear.
Yeah, the bears with this big-ass demon bear.
That's the Sienkiewicz demon bear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a demon bear.
That is Capullo doing the Sienkiewicz demon bear.
Down to the messy cross-hatching and everything.
Yeah, super, super fun.
Looks awesome. Awesome. And it culminates in that big, like, Spawn vampire cape. That Spawn toy that is kind of based on this whole scene, his cape splays open like that in this big bat shape. Looks
super
sick.
Cool.
Here, what happens is Tiffany is taken down. The animals and Spawn's cape consume her. She's left wondering what could have been. Another Tiffany song.
I do love this page. The intruder has been banished. The night beasts, their mission fulfilled, wander away. Night resumes its natural balance. And Spawn just goes...
This is
insane.
Because Tiffany has been reduced to just bones and armor. Yeah. They just shredded her and stripped her. Again, it's that horror movie moment that's just dope.
Yeah. And also Capullo's really good at it. He's great at it. I do think that it's not just McFarlane inking him. he has the instincts for this kind of scene.
Well, you can tell that it's very clear in Capullo's art that he studied a lot of those EC Comics artists and a lot of that early horror art. It's got that Jack Davis style of like horror caricature, and this is a very Jack Davis skeleton in a way, much more gruesome than I think he would have necessarily drawn. But the way like the bones and flesh and like the costume are kind of enmeshed to show the feeling of what you're looking at and bring out that tactile horror.
There are definitely too many bones.
But it's awesome. She's an angel.
But it rules. And also, again, this is the unfortunate thing about being Tony Daniel at this era. If you have to do bones right before Greg Capullo does bones,
you're fucked. It's over.
Yeah, sorry,
silver
man.
Medal. Sorry, man. Not your fault.
It really is like a silver medal situation, though, because I do think if we're thinking about like, all right, so we're in 1996, right? If we're thinking about big comics coming out at the time, obviously we've got the Image guys doing their thing. Is Brandon Choi doing all of the Wildstorm stuff right now with Jim Lee in 96? Regardless, also, even the Marvel and DC stuff, it doesn't look like this. Like, this is different. This still looks different than everything. Even when it looks the same, even when it's doing the pouches and whatever, it's still looking very unique.
Well, and then you get shots like this where it goes, it's a little more gruesome than you get in a Marvel comic, you know?
You're not getting this in Spider-Man. You're not even getting it in X-Men at this point because, oh God, who's even doing X-Men at this point? It's the Kuberts are doing X-Men, but they're not as like visceral and sort of as...
Well, it's also standards and stuff. I mean, even, there's those early issues, those early 90s issues of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, that were contemporary to some of Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man issues that were by Eric Larson, where Venom chases Spider-Man on the desert island. So good.
The island stuff's amazing.
But you see Spider-Man's costume all covered in bone, or you see bones all covered in Spider-Man's costume at the end. Similar pose to this and everything. And it's more straightforward. It's just not gross in the same way. Because
is that where we get the Venom Hamlet?
Yeah, that cover. Such a great issue.
We bought that for our boy, didn't we?
Yeah, shout out to David Pepos, friend of the pod and friend of the podcaster.
He's friends of ours. We don't know if he's a friend of the pod.
I'll give him honorary status no matter what. So I honestly wish this issue ended here. Not because I like that it's like 5 pages short or whatever, but I just wish this was the end because like it's such a great, like powerful, like end of the fight moment. But instead we roll on. We get this next sequence, this 1-page check-in with Wanda in a very oddly sexualized doctor's visit. Like he's checking her heart, checking her ears.
Things that you can do with all of your clothes on.
And she is wearing like lingerie underwear. Like she's dressed to impress. Like this is not, I'm going to the doctor and I know I have to like take my clothes off for an examination underwear. This is, I'm going to my doctor and I guess I want to fuck him tonight underwear. Like it's very sexy and very sexualized and like,
I think in a weird way, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, just we gotta put a sexy girl.
It's weird. Well, there have been times when
Greg it's weird Capullo, and bad. I'm not saying it's good.
There have been times when Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane have pulled back on that and shown her in more casual clothing and stuff. There have been times in this comic where she's been like lounging around reading in like a teddy and a thong. And then there have been times when she's like laying on the phone in like, like yoga
like sweatpants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a loose shirt. And it's like, you guys know what women wear when they're just sitting around. You guys know what people wear.
Yeah. Todd, you're married. And also like both of you are around women.
Yeah.
Enough to know that this is not accurate.
Right. But, whatever. It's a choice. Maybe they wanted to draw something sexy.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
We learned that she's got COVID and she's probably passed it along to Terry Fitzgerald. I mean, basically, he's coughing, he's got halls, and he's like looking for more files. He's cross-checking with satellite data, trying to prove some stuff about Jason Wynn. It implies that sooner or later stuff's going to get really bad for him. Then we get back to the alley finally with Spawn, and who's waiting for him? Who is often waiting for him at the end of these fights, especially against when he runs into the forces of heaven. Pretty much anytime Spawn runs into like a heavenly being, he then immediately has a conversation with Cagliostro, who always tells him, like, you can't run from this. In this case, he at least gives him some more straightforward advice that's kind of
Yeah,
new.
thank God. He
says, your costume is evolving too fast. It's bonding with you. If you let it, it will take over. It will get too powerful, and you'll be, condemned to hell forever. You must master it. You must rein it in.
I kind of wish that Malbolgia had seeded a little bit of I know you're kind of good, but you ended up with me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make you bad.
Which seems to be kind of the story.
It is what it is, but it is like we are 45 issues into Spawn.
And he's still having pep talks with Cagliostro, where Cagliostro's basically in a little more certain terms explaining his own shit to him again.
Yeah, and it's not like Cagliostro's new. Like, he's been around since the first 10 issues. So it's not like he's totally new. It is, it does turn... I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of like, why does Spawn maintain some sort of like popularity in popular culture, but then the book itself sort of like doesn't go anywhere? And the thing that I kind of have landed on is that he looks extremely cool.
100%.
So he will always kind of stick around.
Well, it's like Ghost Rider.
But if you try to explain what Spawn is, he's been every superhero at some point in his publishing history, to the point where you kind of really can't get a beat on what he is, what his plan is, what he does. Spider-Man,
he's being swept along,
He's sort of ancillary to whatever the plot needs him to be. And so even this feels like, all right, so the symbiote now can take you over, which is just a Spider-Man plot.
Yeah.
All right.
You're right about Spawn. I think the thing that makes him stick in people's minds is that he looks fucking sick. And he looks awesome to people who will never give a shit about comics or anything else. A drawing of Spawn looks badass to people.
A toy of Spawn looks badass.
I think that's the other thing, is that the toys captured a lot of people that would have missed comics. The toys were there. I mean, even when I wasn't necessarily picking up the comics, I was picking up those toys. Didn't care how they correspond to the comics in a lot of ways. I said it. It's like Ghost Rider Motorcycle Hero. He's so cute running around in his blue jumpsuit. He looks sick on the side of a van. So, like, when people in the 70s saw Ghost Rider, it was like, oh, fuck yeah, Ghost Rider, this rules. He's a flaming skull on a motorcycle. The comics are almost universally mid to bad. And I'm not saying that about Spawn. I'm saying that about Ghost Rider. And
you're right.
Mid
is the high point of Ghost Rider.
Because people try to make him too complicated. They can't stick to what's cool about that element.
But also too, I think that's the thing that's like kind of the problem that Spawn like runs into, right? Is like, fuck, we got like angels and demons and fucking heaven and hell, and we're at this point we're going to be like 30 some odd issues or episodes in, almost 30 episodes in. Holy hell, we've really been thrown through loops of like who this character is, what he wants to do, what is actually trying to be accomplished. We're not really getting a steady through line, and everything is way more complicated than high school kid accidentally gets spider powers and tries to save New York.
Well, the thing is, Spawn has that. He is a hardened killer with a heart of gold who finds himself in hell and makes a deal to go back to Earth, where he has to choose between serving the worst angels, like the worst parts of himself, or turning to the better angels of his nature. I think that makes sense. And I think that there's something that I get why Todd McFarlane finds so much power in the idea of someone who has all this power and has to learn how to use it for himself and in ways that, even if they only benefit him, benefit someone instead of solely causing destruction. The problem is, to lay that out has now taken almost 50 issues, and we have gotten these little hints of some people saying, like, you don't get it, do you? Your role between heaven and hell. And it's like, no, Cagliostro, if you just sat him down and looked in the eye and said, look, you are the once in a eternity Hellspawn who has the potential to overcome your hellish nature if you can only find that goodness in yourself, and you must do so. I will show you how. That is a much more straightforward version of, again, these so many conversations. And credit to Greg Capullo here. He is unlocking new levels of drawing a conversation between Cagliostro and Spawn. Like, we're getting angles we haven't gotten. Cagliostro's hat splayed out in that one middle panel from behind, close up on Cog's eyes, these angles that he's taking, these Dutch angles, and then that
I think
last
that this scene feels so dynamic.
Yeah.
And when you realize it's just two guys talking to each other, you're like,
a conversation
wow.
that we've seen so many times. That panel, the last panel, close up on Spawn's eye, where you can see Cog walking away in the reflection.
Yeah.
Fucking looks great. At the same time, this conversation could have been done. This could have been an email. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's because this book kind of ends a couple of times. Like you just said, like, oh, this could end with Tiffany dying, right? Or it could end, and then we get the Wanda shit, and you're like, okay,
we have to check in with Wanda.
And then you get Terry, and you're like, okay,
it is a little Return of the King.
And then you're like, all right, Cagliostro shows up. Hold on, like, if it ends with your outer shell has advanced too far to relinquish control, it craves evil, it yearns to be in its presence. That's how it feeds, how it lives. What do you have to do now? What you have to do now is train it, become its master. Do you understand? It's not its host, its master. You have to control. And if I don't, then God help us all.
Yeah.
That's the perfect ending to basically anything. And then we spend one more page.
And I get that this is setting up the stakes of the, like, Spawn has to learn control. But it's done that so many times. I love this panel of him pulling the costume off his arm. It looks great. But again, it's just another thing he's been told so many times. Then what happens is Spawn falls asleep. The costume wakes up and takes Al Simmons' body into the dumpster where the worms and maggots are feeding on the trash so that the costume can feed on the worms and maggots. Again, it's not bad. The costume moves, careful not to wake its host, trying to find the ideal spot. A place where it can grow, multiply, thrive. Then the living carapace settles back down, content to have found a home for his worms, his carriers, his evil. And it's another good ending, but there have been 3 good endings so far.
Yeah.
And, like, this one doesn't feel as, like, the costume's kind of taking a shit of all these worms and stuff. The bats hanging from the costume are cool.
So cool. That shit fucking rules. Those are the tiniest bats, but that's okay. I wish that this ending we had gotten at the end of, like, last issue or 2 issues ago. Like, the sort of, like, the costume is doing this outside of Al, because I think it would have made and if I don't, then God help us all.
Yeah.
Hit so much harder.
Right. And it is building up that idea of, like, we're now getting to Spawn as werewolf kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which, again, just like
not what he's really been to this point, but
he's been everything.
That's what he is now.
He's been everything in this arc. He's been a Frankenstein. He's been a werewolf. He's been a vampire. He's been all these things. And, like, it's just Spawn can be everything. And I think some of that subconsciously, maybe for Todd McFarlane, is putting Spawn, I think correctly, on the level of, like, Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, these characters who can be reinvented time and time again. And we're seeing that in real time. And some of it harkens back to, like, those Silver Age DC stories that were like the sci-fi era of Superman, where every issue it is, your world is now upended and you have to find a way to just get back to that baseline. Like, oh, Superman, now your brain is 5 times as big and you're super smart, but it's going to end the world if you don't find a way to make yourself normal smart again. It's always something, and it's the same thing with Spawn. You have to find a way to get back to yourself through this weird carnage that is going on around you. It just feels a little directionless because we've been doing it so much and so often at this point.
Yeah, and I know that like longtime listeners are going to say like, yeah, what did you expect? Like the book just sort of circles itself a lot and sort of doesn't move forward. But, you know, I want to also try to give credit to the fact that as publishing initiatives change, as sort of like people's tastes change on a larger level, and we're in 1996 right now, right? Mm-hmm. We're right on the cusp of Marvel going bankrupt. They'll be bought by Toy Biz. They are going to go in a kind of huge fallow period through the late 90s where, like, yes, there are books that come out. Yes, there are books that sell, that move units, right? We still have Spider-Man and X-Men sort of selling at the time, but it's not until Marvel Knights in the early 2000s that we really get a renaissance of one of the big two, at least.
Well, that's when like we get Marvel Knights, we get the Bill Jemas era, which is like a double-edged sword, and it goes kind of both ways in quality. But yeah, no, I mean, comics are in a point at this part of the 90s where the bloom is starting to come off the rose pretty significantly for the like. It's already the crash of the speculation market is starting. Things are being oversold and overblown. Spawn 1 sold like millions of copies. And that means that it's not worth much to people who probably were expecting it to be. So, you know, I think it's interesting to see Spawn in this era. And I also think that this is the double-edged sword of going back and reading in an anthology comics that were coming out, you know, bi-weekly or monthly or something, that were attempting to speak to you in your own language versus looking at what's new and what's fresh. We're having an experience with these comics where each issue kind of dragging its feet is happening much more quickly for us even than it's happening for the readers at the time. We can see a more compressed vision of it. So not to say that it probably didn't feel that way to readers at the time. It's just an interesting perspective. And I still think, you know, I'm sure that Spawn is mostly going to spin its wheels for hundreds of issues in a lot of ways. I'm prepared for that. I don't care. If you look at it, that's what Spider-Man does. That's what Superman does too.
That's what all comics do.
Yes, exactly. It's not a ding against Spawn or a reason not to want to read it. The craft of it is still there. There are still these moments of creative joy that we observe and feel in these comics, like that first splash page of issue 45. The first Capullo of him being impaled on that creepy tree looks so sick. And it's like, oh man, this is so much fun to read and so much fun to look at. The joy for me doesn't come from like always having payoff, because if it did, I wouldn't be into monthly superhero comics ever.
Being a superhero comics reader means that you're really into edging. So
yes, you have to have the love of the delayed blast fireball. So yeah, I mean, I think that at least they're trying to move the needle a little bit with this and set some new stakes with Spawn and his costume and elevate things to a point at least where they're adding some new elements of the mythos. They're trying to get somewhere. We're moving on from like files every issue. We didn't get a Cygor diversion here. I almost wish I would have accepted a Cygor diversion earlier in the issue if it meant it ended on Tiffany like being devoured or whatever. But you know, that also means it's been 3 issues since we've seen what
checked in on Cygor. Yeah. He's still trying to get to New York. He's taking his time. Maybe he walked instead of ran.
Oh, we did see him in the issue with the Terrorizer. The little
We
kid
saw him at
Kara.
40. That was 42, yeah.
Yeah, so.
But that we just got through 45.
Yeah, it's been 3 issues now.
So,
we still don't know what's going to happen when Cygor meets Spawn.
I bet they're going to fight.
I bet they are. No, they're going to shake hands. They're going to play chess. What did you think of this two-parter for Spawn versus Tiffany?
I think it's bad.
Oh, we missed out on them having a relationship. They could have been Spiffany instead of Spongula.
That would have been much better. No, here's the thing. I think that Tiffany feels like a character that gets introduced just so she can die, and then that's exactly what can happen. And I know that is again a trope of the books that we love, right? Is like, oh, here we go, this fucking character that matters.
Yeah.
It also does feel like it makes Angela stronger in a way, because Angela was really cool, and
she got to have a personality and some adventures and some character development. Tiffany kind of just gets to be a hotshot and get
and she just dies because of it, almost. That said, I like the direction of the Night Evil, even if I don't like its execution totally. I like Greg Capullo drawing it. I do know that this is going to lead to sort of like maggot face Spawn in 25 or so issues or whatever. But like, I like that it's leading to something. At the time, if I was reading it without knowing what the future holds, I think I might be a little confused and maybe a little bit disappointed, because I would have been like, I don't know. Can he just recover himself?
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind that she's gone now, because the thing is, like, at least from the perspective of a reader who doesn't know if she's going to come back, I assume she's probably not, but whatever. Death isn't death in comic books, especially not for a cosmic being, so I wouldn't have, at the time, without knowing what's coming, I wouldn't have taken that as like a letdown necessarily. I would have been like, oh, what's going to happen next with this?
Yeah, I hear that.
But
I think it's just that she's not compelling the way that Angela was very compelling.
No, she seems...
It's partly from her character design.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, it's because I like Tony Daniel just fine. I think he's a good artist. Doesn't sell me on Tiffany.
Yeah.
And when I see Greg Capullo's Tiffany, I'm like, oh, that's a cool character.
No, she's dead.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's helped by Todd inking her, right?
Right. We'll see. If she's dead, I assume she is. So, yeah, I think for me, the thing I like about this, and there was in the last issue too, is the leaning into the like horror elements of it. Yeah. Anytime Spawn does that, I feel myself like really getting into it. I think Tiffany, the fight was cool. I think it was at least a slightly different fight, and it still ended with Spawn getting impaled in a lot of ways. But I liked the fight itself. I especially like Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane's rendering of it. Yeah.
I think, honestly, 45 stands as one of the all-timers in terms of like really cool, like horror imagery, some solid like fight sequences that they're not reinventing the wheel there, but they're just delivering on some really cool stuff. And then also in the moments where we don't have that kind of stuff going on, Capullo's really good at those character moments. He's really good at the stuff between Sam and Twitch. He's really good at the stuff where it's just Cog and Spawn talking. He gives us a lot.
Yeah.
And I was already a Capullo fan going in, but I'm having so much fun digging more into his early career on Spawn. I knew it from X-Force and a little bit from Quasar, but so I thought that I knew early Capullo, but digging into this, I'm like, this is where this guy just took it to another level, and it's really exciting. I mean, I'm really, really, really loving it.
I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again at some point, but
you love being a turtle.
That's exactly right. I was not much of a Greg Capullo fan. I respected Greg Capullo before reading this. Like, I respect him as an artist. I don't think he's bad. His Batman wasn't to my taste. I'm realizing now how much I'm really loving his art on Spawn.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just growing into a Greg Capullo fan. And that's the value in reading these comics to me. Even above like any analysis we give, anything like that, the personal value to me is that I'm loving comics and artists that I hadn't loved and read before, and it's making me want to seek out more comics and more art. And that kind of excitement is, I think, the best thing a comic can do. The best thing a comic can do, especially a comic that is a sequential monthly superhero comic, make you want to read more of it. Make you go, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think also, too, it's having that effect for me with Todd McFarlane, where I think that I always thought of, I thought I knew who Todd McFarlane was, and it puts a different lens on his Spider-Man for me.
Sure, yeah.
In terms of what he was trying to do. And Torment especially is that first arc, that 6-parter. And I'm like, I read that again recently. I was able to get like all 6 issues for like $3 or whatever. And I was like, kind of slams. It kind of slams and it looks awesome. You want to know who draws a great Wolverine? Todd McFarlane.
Yeah,
like that guy draws the hell out of Wolverine. Yeah. And why is Wolverine teaming up with Spider-Man in that arc? Doesn't matter. They got to go find Wendigo. Let's go. You know? And I was like, wow, this is not a perfect comic by any stretch, but it's so cool.
Yeah. And you can feel even still some of the electricity that was on the stands at the time. Like, I remember when Todd McFarlane was hugely popular and stuff. I remember that, you know, and I didn't have the perspective on it I have now as an adult, but like, I knew the name and I knew the creations and certainly the comics. And you can still feel that electricity of like, oh, this is different from something that came before it in a 100%. Substantial way. And I love that about it. And that's what I'm really loving about Spawn is going back and seeing, like you said, learning about these creators and learning who they are and learning what parts of Todd McFarlane I really enjoy, what I think his strengths are. It's really beautiful to discover that.
Yeah. It's also leading me to understand, I think, especially writer artists on a different level than I did before, maybe.
True. Seeing that evolution.
Yeah. The guy that I'll point to, and I think we've invoked him on the podcast before, and I would be so curious to know his feelings on Spawn, but it's Daniel Warren Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
I think a man who has forged his own path in the comics industry.
But gets the medium in such a singular way.
He truly does. But I have bought a couple of his older books and sort of dug into them and sort of seen the sort of, oh, you weren't great at it yet, but you got so goddamn good at it. Holy shit, is so crazy. But I'm curious that's a guy that I don't know. I'm sure one of us will see him at a con and be like, do you have any feelings about Spawn? And he might say no, but
Daniel Warren Johnson, come on the podcast.
Yeah, please. Oh my God, please. His Transformers right now it just continues to blow my mind. And it's because it's like this perfect distillation of, man, he would do a great Spawn. He really would. He really would, because it would, but like, I would want like Daniel Warren Johnson to do like Ultimate Spawn.
Just do his own thing.
No, what I'm saying is like alternate reality. You have to restart Spawn. If I had to pick one guy, it's him.
I mean, I'd pick him for a lot of stuff, so I could certainly see him.
So anyway,
do we have any back matter from this issue?
I don't have it because I don't have these 2 issues. So
that's right. Cool.
We will in the future have some references to it. So I'm sure it's a future issues that I do have, but I don't have anything this time. So you can follow us at Spawnography Pod or at Spawnography on various social media. If you look up Spawnography, it's a stupid enough word, you'll find us on some level. You can find me at PE Lightning on most social media or at lapsed.punk. How about you, George?
I'm not really on social media anymore at this point. My Blue Sky
Great.
is deactivated. My Twitter is dormant. Just taking a break from all that for a while. But you can listen to some of my music. If you want to really support me, I would love it if you went and listened to some of my music on YouTube. It's just Witch Crisis.
Hell yeah.
All right.
Cool. Well, listen, George. For Todd so loved the world.
He gave his only begotten spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawn!